If you ever organized a diversity and inclusion event and people were inspired and the energy was really high, and then after the event, nothing really changed, this video might actually help you. Because what you're experiencing is not random, it's predictable. And I call it the keynote trap. My name is Osiris, and I'm a trainer and speaker on diversity and inclusion. And I'm on two missions. One mission is to change the image of diversity and inclusion that's sometimes a little bit negative, to actually change it to one that's more positive and actually more realistic. And secondly, I am focused on turning inspiration into actually lasting behavior change. So, what happens? A lot of the times after an event, during the event, people are nodding, there's momentum, sharing ideas, or having hallway conversations. You feel it. But 3 months later, there's silence and the energy has faded. Employees who were excited are now frustrated, and the one who's in charge of diversity and inclusion sometimes might feel alone again. And the initiatives that were considered are now being postponed. That's the keynote trap. When an organization creates momentum, but no mechanism to actually use the momentum. So why does this happen? Because keynotes actually do matter. They create shared language and they spark awareness, but a keynote doesn't often shift a culture. What typically happens is that after 1 or 2 weeks, there's the energy and there's the conversation and the enthusiasm, but then after 3 weeks, operational work starts to take over. And then 3, 4 months later, the follow up becomes let's get to it when we have time. And after that period, most people become skeptical again. There was a talk about diversity and inclusion, but nothing really changed because there was no mechanism to use the momentum. And one of the difficulties is that afterwards, sometimes um, it's more difficult to engage people again because some people might get more resistance um, because there was no change. Yeah, so they don't always create lasting change. However, there are situations where I've seen that keynotes actually have been quite successful. So, one of the things that I've experienced once was a few months ago, I think. There was an organization that told me that their diversity and inclusion working group was struggling a little bit. They had a low capacity. There was a lot of employees got a new job, and and many of them happened to be part of the DNI working group. So they were a little bit, low on capacity. So one of the things I asked at the end of the keynote was, "What would you like to learn more about?" To the audience, I asked this question, and um, I received some input that I could give back to the working group, so they knew where the energy was of the entire organization, and there where energy is to make changes, that's where there's actually a lot of potential to be made. The second question I asked was, would you consider joining the working group? And the result was, when I asked these two questions, was 4 new members joined the working group. There was more support beyond HR, IT, finance, and operations. And the D&I officer, the one who's in charge of diversity and inclusion, finally had a bigger team to work with. So this was really a clear story of success. The other example that I know of was where I was invited to do a keynote. And before we set up the keynote, I already suggested that to at least offer a few workshops afterwards. And what happened was people came to the keynote, were inspired, and then could immediately sign up to various workshops that we already had arranged for them. Um, so they already knew what to do with their interest right after. So that's basically a very important thing to do for a keynote. This is not a miracle that works. These are systems that you take into account right before planning your keynote. So if you're not following up, if you don't plan the following up prior to the keynote, you're actually hoping for change. And I believe it's much better to actually plan it in and ensure that the change will happen. So what makes an effective follow-up? There are a few things that I would recommend. Number one, I already said it, it's planned before the event. So when people walk out of the room, they already know what their next step is going to be. Number two, make the action specific and actionable. So they actually know this is what I exactly can do, and this might be the result of it. Number three, it has a clear owner. So if you have specific um, initiatives and that you want to set up, make sure that every initiative has an owner to follow up on it. If everyone is responsible, nobody's responsible. And number four, it needs to happen short term, within 2 weeks. Preferably, the first steps have to be taken, not 2 months. Energy goes up, and you want to make use of this momentum. Lastly, what I'd like to give is, in case you want to take into account like what you could do um, with making sure that there's a bigger buy-in in your organization, that more people support diversity and inclusion. This is the model that I use, the D&I buy-in. It has three parts: the embedding, the application, and the measuring part. And the first part is the embedding diversity and inclusion in culture and leadership. That's one of the key facets that I always recommend to focus on in order to go from having resistance in your organizations towards diversity and inclusion to actually more buy-in and support. The second one is application and practical tools, so you can actually use them to create a more inclusive environment. And the third one is measuring and adjusting. A lot of organizations that I see are doing like quite a lot of initiatives, but fail to really record what the results were from their initiatives. They don't have KPIs beforehand, like key performance indicators. Um, and it's so difficult that after, for example, a year of making initiatives, but not being able to show the board what the effect was, it becomes more difficult to then garner support from the board. So I always recommend focusing also on measurements. So this is a short video on the keynote trap. I hope it helped. And if you need some help figuring out where your organization currently stands, um, we're going to put a link towards our scan either in this video, below this video, or hopefully attached to this video somehow, wherever you might find this video, if you need our help for it. If not, if you're going to do it by yourself, please remember these three facets. I've seen that the organizations that have a working group that focuses on these three tend to have a higher result in achieving diversity inclusion, or at least the support for diversity inclusion within their organization. Thank you very much.